A very warm welcome to the next in our series of at-home interviews with international business leaders. Today I'm delighted to be joined by Erin Platts, Head of EMEA and UK President for Silicon Valley Bank. I'm also joined by my colleague Nick Miller, who's a partner in our global financial services practice. Erin and Nick, a very warm welcome to you both.
Good morning.
Thank you. Good morning.
I'll kick things off by saying, Erin, thank you very much for joining us for this session. And really with a question, which was, can you tell us a little bit about both SVB in Europe and your career to date, and really what's brought you to the role that you have now?
Sure. Well, Mike, Nick, thanks again for having me this morning. I'm really excited to talk to you about Silicon Valley Bank and really what we're seeing across our client base. So at Silicon Valley Bank, we are a really simple traditional commercial bank, but we happen to work with the most innovative companies globally. So our remit is to support innovation businesses from really early stage startups through to public and private corporates and everything in between, as well as the venture capital and private equity funds that invest in innovation and outside of it. So we are, like I said, a traditional commercial bank providing banking, lending, financing solutions. But given our core focus on those two subsectors, we've built up a really strong brand and understanding of how innovation businesses scale, grow, and we try to leverage that expertise and pattern recognition to help our clients be successful. So across EMEA, we've got about 400 people across 5 countries and around 3,000 clients that, again, are a mix of innovation businesses from early stage startups, venture-backed, PE-backed, or public corporates, and then the venture capital and private equity funds as well. And my role is leading our EMEA business. I've been with Silicon Valley Bank for over 16 years now. I guess time flies when you're having fun. Started in the US and I moved over here in 2007 when there was about 4 or 5 of us on the ground, really to help figure out what could Silicon Valley Bank become in the UK and Europe, to get to know the market a little bit better, and of course to grow the team and the client base. So it's been, fun, challenging, exciting decade plus, both within SVB and also seeing the ecosystem grow and thrive in that period of time as well.
Erin, having lived and worked in both the US and in Europe, what are the key differences between the mindset of US tech businesses and their European equivalents?
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking about this question. If you asked me that back in 2007, I would say the difference would be really quite stark. But it's actually really converged, I think, in terms of what we're seeing and the expectations, the ambition of innovation businesses here versus the US. I think the biggest difference, a lot of it is driven just by the size and maturity of the respective markets. So the US has obviously been around for a lot longer. We've had multiple cycles. The amount of capital available is huge. So really the sophistication of the whole ecosystem is a couple of decades further along than what we've got in the UK and Europe more broadly. But like I was saying, probably the last 5 to 7 years, we've seen just a huge amount of momentum across the innovation sector. We've seen a number of repeat entrepreneurs that have started companies, sold companies, and are doing again. So that pattern recognition and flywheel is starting to turn. And we've seen a lot more cross-fertilization between the markets as well. So maybe back in 2007, 2008, 2009, maybe the ambition level wasn't the same. The expectations around fundraising were a lot lower. That delta has really shrunk pretty substantially. I think there still is a little bit of a difference in terms of style. And one example I always give is our clients that are looking to expand in the US, one of the hardest roles that they find to fill is head of sales for an enterprise software company, as an example. And it's just the style and expectations of selling is a little bit different, and something that I think on both sides of the Atlantic we just need to be cognizant of. But there are still some differences in terms of market dynamics that we can talk about, but I'm excited to say that delta between expectations and ambition has really closed.
Just to continue on that theme, Erin, for a moment, when you think about entrepreneurship in say Europe versus the US, is there a difference in mindset, and particularly around the willingness to fail and go again?
Yeah, I would say the delta I was referring to is that absolutely was the case probably 10, 12 years ago, where the ambition and expectations of some of the founders that we saw in the UK was let's build a really solid local business and let's sell it for 100 million, and that would be hugely successful. And of course that is successful in its own right. But now we're seeing founders with the ambition to create and grow global category leaders. And that is a huge shift that we've seen in the last 5 to 7 years. So I do think that the appetite for risk and the appetite for failure has increased, but I also think it's due also because of structural change, right? So if you've got additional sources of capital locally, if you've got more sophistication around founder liquidity earlier in the process, that all incents risk taking. So it's not just I would say, a mental shift. Part of it is a structural shift as well, as the market has evolved and become more sophisticated.
There's been quite a lot of discussion in the media around K-shaped economic recoveries. Is this a model you recognise? I know there's been a lot of discussions of different shapes of recoveries in the last 6 months, but is the K-shaped one you recognise, and especially where it relates to the tech businesses you spend so much time with?
Yeah, I think this is the hard crystal ball type question: K-shaped, V-shaped, U-shaped. I guess taking a step back, fundamentally, do I believe that the innovation and tech sector is going to be a key driver and key leading light to help the UK out of, to deal with the repercussions of COVID and to manage through an economic recovery? Absolutely. I think that if you take a step back and you look at the ingredients that are and the dynamics at play, there's huge amounts of dry capital sitting on the sidelines from a venture and private equity perspective. There's just too much quality in terms of the companies that have been started and built over time across a variety of different subsectors. So we're not just dependent upon fintech or enterprise software or consumer businesses. There's huge diversification from a subsector perspective. So, but that being said, we can't ignore what's happening externally with respect to the economy, with respect to COVID, and the increase in the numbers that we're seeing. So while I remain bullish that the tech sector is going to be sort of a leading light, so to speak, to help with economic recovery, I think we're going to have a really challenging 6 to 9 months ahead. And it will further bifurcate the market, right? There's going to be a number of companies that are going to thrive, that are going to access the dry powder that I was referring to. But there's going to be a number, I think, particularly at the earlier stages, that have less traction, more thinly capitalized, or those companies that are much more capital intensive that may struggle. And if you think about the why, a lot of the companies that we work with across our portfolio are loss-making businesses, and they're funded by usually venture capital firms. And they've kind of pulled all the levers that they've got access to at the moment, right? They've cut spend, they've furloughed staff, they've taken out discretionary costs, they've drawn on their banking facilities, they've raised an inside round. So there's not a whole lot of additional action they can take to extend runway if we continue to see, the repercussions of COVID for a longer period of time.
Erin, thank you. And that brings us to an end to part 1, but do join us again shortly for part 2.